Hey guys, it's Chandler Vincent. Welcome back for another month. Let's get started.
Check that bottom right hand corner, look at that part number, make sure it's matching the blueprint that's on the video, and make sure we're on the same project and we'll get started. So first step is figuring out our pieces. Let's look at the top right hand corner of the blueprint. We'll start with part number 1. That's your base plate. It's got kind of a oblong triangle shape to it. That's part number 1. Part number 2 is your 2 small rectangles. They're your smallest pieces of this project. There should be 2 of them. And part number 3 are your longer rectangles. There'll also be 2 of these. That's part number 3. Part number 4 is the same length as part number 3, just a little more narrow. Be about inch. It'll be 1.875 in width. That's number 4. Part number 5 is the pipe. It'll be 6 inches long. All right, part number 6 is a triangle with the radius cut out for the pipe. And part number 7 is the big rectangle with the welder made logo. And then part number 8 is the same size as part number 7, just with no logo. You should have a total of 10 pieces in this project. If everything lines up, let's get started. Alright, to clean these parts, I'm just using a brand new clean flapper wheel, getting the dross off the back side and lightly hitting the weld face area. Doesn't need a whole lot of cleaning, just make sure you get rid of that dross. Alright, now that that's done, I'm going to rub them down with some acetone, get any surface contaminants off the parts. Just make sure you guys use the right protective equipment when using these harsh chemicals. Okay, now that that's clean, we're going to get tacked up. We're going to tack everything we can that is on the same plane. So right here I'm tacking parts 7 and 2 together. I tacked them on the back side. That'll come in handy here in a minute. And now we're going to do parts 8 and 2, just the opposite. There's those. Now we're going to transfer over to the EZTack. And we're going to start with parts 3 and 4. I'll line up a nice corner joint. After that, we're going to rotate it and do parts 4 and 2 again. But I want you guys to look at that blueprint and look at the way those line up, because that's not going to be a corner joint right there. I'll show it a little closer here. They just butt up together. Look at the blueprint, it shows. Just make sure you don't do a corner joint or you'll have a problem when you go to tack it up to the assembly. And now I'm going to tack parts 2 and 6 together. That's that triangle with the radius piece. While I'm here, I'm going to just brush those tacks a little bit, make them nice and clean. And that is it for the EZTack. Okay, now that that assembly's tacked together, we're going to tack our parts 2 and 1 together. I'm going to do a little bit of pre-bending. I'm going to tack part 2 onto the assembly, and then just line up that part number 7, bend it over till it lines up nice with that corner joint. I'm going to do the same on this other side. All right, it's time to do some layout. Looks like we're in 1/2 inch from the edge. I just like to grab my sliding T-square, set it at 1/2 inch, and just slide it across there. Makes a nice little scratch. Where it should be about 1/2 inch all the way around that back side of part 1. I'm just making sure that part number 5, that pipe set in there good, and now I'm tacking the assembly to the base plate and getting that pipe tacked in. Okay, now I'm just going through and adding nice tacks on all the corners, making sure none of the parts warp away from each other and break during the welding process. And that helps transfer heat throughout the project. Okay, so now we're welding. We're going to be doing our horizontal joints first. And then we're going to go and do our vertical skewed corners, verticals on the pipes. And then we can finish off by wrapping up those vertical corner joints and tying it all into one nice tie-in at the top. And then finish up at the base. We'll be done. So let's get started with the welding process. So that fillet weld meeting parts 4 and 2 together, you guys will notice that welds a lot easier than the typical fillet welds you guys have been welding around these base plates. And the reason why is because there's nothing behind that fillet weld absorbing the heat like your workbench on those base plates. That's the difference between having a heat sink behind your weld and not having a heat sink. And that's typically why these fillet welds are so much harder on the bases, is because your table is absorbing the heat out of the project. So that's going to be a cool little thing for you guys to watch. Make sure you pay attention to the difference between that top fillet weld and your base plate, and that'll help you understand a little bit with the difference and how much that table's actually absorbing the heat out of that fillet weld. All right, now we're going to do these vertical skewed fillet joints, kind of like a butt joint or a really open corner joint up the sides here. All right, guys, I'm going to draw a top view of this weld joint that's going from part 7 and 8 to the pipe. It's got a very unique challenge to it, and I'm going to explain why. So on the right here, we've got part number 5, which is the pipe. And to the left here, we got part number 6, which is that plate. And we're looking straight down on this weld joint. And when you go to weld this weld, it's going to want to pull to the right because part number 5 is thicker than your plate on part number 7 and 6. So I want you guys to angle your torch and your tungsten to favor the pipe and focus all your heat on the thicker part. And then add your filler on the thinner side, giving it more of a cooling method, which will even out the thicknesses of your weld joint and help you weld that joint more. So you'll find that weld pull is going to want to pull to that pipe because it's thicker. Just try to favor that one side and add your filler on the thinner side. What it's going to do is thin that plate. It's going to cool that thinner side down and even out the heat distribution in that weld pool. So that's a fun little challenge we've thrown in this project. It's going to be hard, but try to take this into consideration and see how you do. I'm using that TIG Finger a lot for my filler wire hand when resting on this project. These are very handy tools. Okay, now that those vertical members on the pipes welded, we are ready to go up the corner joints, the vertical corners there on parts 2. I'm just going to carry that weld all the way up and over, going one direction, making sure I have a nice full radius contour on those corner joints and a nice smooth transition from weld to weld with no stop starts visible in between each pass. Okay, now for the fillet weld along the base. I'm pushing every bit of 250 amps on this weld. You got that table pulling the heat out of the base plate. I'm just trying to keep a nice, tight, clean, consistent bead all the way around. We've got videos coming on aluminum fillet welds because I do believe they're on the harder end of most. Okay, I think that wraps up my project for the month of July for the aluminum. I really enjoyed this project. It's got a very nice set of challenges along that pipe, a lot of nice outside corner joints, a lot of fillet weld practice. I really love this project. I love the way it turned out. Thanks for being part of the Welder Made family. We'll see you next month.